I had what seemed like the perfect life. A beautiful home in the suburbs, a successful career as an engineer, and a family I adored. Jessica, my wife of 12 years, and our 3 kids meant everything to me. But last Tuesday changed everything. I came home early from a business trip and heard Jessica on the phone in our bathroom. I will never forget her words. "Can you believe? Lucas still has no clue. 3 kids, all yours, and he is still paying for their private school." Before I tell you how I discovered my entire life was built on lies, tell me where you are watching from, and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you will want to see how I turned this betrayal into the ultimate comeback. I met Jessica during my final year of college. She was everything I had ever wanted: smart, beautiful, and ambitious. We dated for 2 years before getting married in a small ceremony with close family and friends. I still remember how happy I felt that day, completely unaware that my bride had been keeping secrets from the very beginning. After graduation, I landed a job at a respected engineering firm. The hours were long, but the pay was good, and I was determined to give Jessica and our future children a comfortable life. Within 3 years, we welcomed our first daughter, Emma. Jacob followed 2 years later, and Sophie arrived 18 months after that. I worked even harder after each birth, putting in overtime and weekends to ensure they would have every opportunity in life. We moved to a spacious home in an upscale neighborhood known for its excellent schools. Despite this, Jessica insisted the kids attend Westfield Academy, a prestigious private school that cost more than our mortgage each month. I never questioned it. I wanted the best for them. And if that meant working 60-hour weeks and skipping vacations, so be it. My mother, Martha, lived just 30 minutes away and was a constant presence in our lives. She adored the kids and often watched them while Jessica and I worked. Martha and Jessica grew particularly close over the years, shopping together and having lunch dates while I was at the office. I was grateful they got along so well, especially after my father passed away 5 years into our marriage. Their relationship seemed like one less thing for me to worry about. Looking back, I should have noticed the signs sooner. Around the time Sophie turned 4, Jessica started behaving differently. She became protective of her phone, changing passwords and quickly ending calls when I entered the room. She began having more girls' nights that kept her out until the early morning hours. When I questioned her late returns, she would get defensive, accusing me of not trusting her or being controlling. I also noticed Martha acting strangely whenever I expressed concerns about Jessica. She would quickly change the subject or make excuses. "Jessica works hard taking care of those kids all day. She deserves some fun." Or, "You work so much, Lucas. You cannot expect her to just sit at home waiting for you." At the time, I thought my mother was just being supportive of Jessica. I had no idea she was covering for her betrayal. During a family dinner one Sunday, Jessica received a text that made her smile in a way I had not seen in years. When I glanced at her phone, I saw the name Alex from work on the screen. She quickly put the phone away, but I caught several more texts from Alex throughout the evening. Later that week, I noticed multiple calls from the same contact. When I casually asked about Alex, Jessica told me he was a new colleague in the marketing department. The explanation seemed reasonable, but something felt off. Jessica had never mentioned him before, despite apparently texting him at all hours. Then came the night that shattered my world. I was supposed to be in Chicago until Friday for a client meeting, but we wrapped up early, and I caught a late flight home on Wednesday. It was just after midnight when my Uber dropped me off. I expected everyone to be asleep, but I noticed the bathroom light on through our bedroom window. As I quietly entered our bedroom, I heard Jessica speaking in hushed tones from the ensuite bathroom. Thinking she might be on a work call, I paused before making my presence known. That pause changed everything. "He has absolutely no idea," Jessica said with a laugh that sent chills down my spine. "Can you believe Lucas still has no clue? 3 kids, all yours, and he is still paying for their private school." My legs nearly gave out beneath me. I steadied myself against the wall, straining to hear more. "I know we should tell him eventually," she continued. "But why ruin a good thing? He makes great money, and he is so busy with work he barely notices when I am gone." There was a pause as she listened to the person on the other end. "No, Alexander, we do not need to worry about Martha. She has been covering for us since the beginning. She knows everything, and still thinks it is better for Lucas to remain in the dark. She keeps saying it would destroy him if he found out, especially after his father died. My own mother. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. The two people I trusted most had been lying to me for years. After hearing Jessica's phone call, I spent the next week in a daze. I went through the motions at work while my mind raced with questions. How long had this been going on? Who was Alexander really? And how could my own mother betray me like this? Rather than confronting Jessica immediately, I decided to gather more information. I waited until she was in the shower one evening, then used her fingerprint to unlock her phone while she slept. What I found confirmed my worst fears and revealed even more painful truths. Alexander was not a new colleague as Jessica had claimed. He was her former boyfriend from before we met. Their relationship had never ended. The text messages dated back years, thousands of them filled with intimate details and plans to meet when I was away on business. There were photos of them together. Vacation pictures from times when Jessica had told me she was visiting friends or attending work conferences. And most painful of all, there were messages about the children. Emma has your eyes. Lucas just thinks she got them from his grandmother. Jacob is getting so tall like you. Lucas is proud, thinking he got his height genes. Sophie asked why her hair is so different from Lucas's today. I told her she looks like my side of the family. My entire family was a lie. The children I had read bedtime stories to, taught to ride bikes, and comforted after nightmares were not mine. Yet I loved them completely. The knowledge that they did not share my blood did not diminish my love for them, which somehow made the betrayal even more painful. I found something else in Jessica's emails correspondence with my mother. Regular updates about the affair, warnings about when to be careful, and discussions about how to keep me in the dark. In one email from 3 years ago, my mother wrote, "Lucas is working late again on Tuesday. You should be safe to meet Alexander if you want." The next day I called in sick to work and drove to my mother's house. Martha seemed surprised to see me on a weekday morning but invited me in for coffee. We made small talk for a few minutes before I found the courage to speak the truth. "I know everything, Mom. About Jessica and Alexander. About the kids. About your part in all of it." The color drained from her face. She did not deny it or pretend not to understand. She simply collapsed into a chair at the kitchen table, her hands shaking as she set down her coffee mug. "How long have you known?" she asked in a whisper. "Does it matter? How could you do this to me? You are my mother. You were supposed to protect me." Tears filled her eyes. "I was protecting you, Lucas. After your father died, you were so devastated. Jessica told me about Alexander right after Emma was born. I was shocked, angry. I wanted her to tell you the truth. But then I saw how happy you were with that baby. How you had finally started to live again after your father's death. So you decided that living a lie was better than facing the truth." The betrayal cut deeper with each word. I told myself it was for the best, that knowing would hurt you more than not knowing. Jessica promised it was over with Alexander after Emma, but then Jacob came along and I realized she had lied to me too. By then it felt too late. You loved those children so much. I could not bear to be the one to take them away from you. And Sophie. What about when Sophie was born? Martha looked down at her hands. By then I was in too deep. I had already helped hide the truth for so long. Jessica convinced me that maintaining the secret was the kindest thing for everyone, especially the children. The kindest thing. My voice rose, despite my efforts to stay calm. You let me build my entire life on a lie. You watched me work myself to exhaustion to provide for children who are not even mine. How is that kindness? They are yours in every way that matters, Lucas. You raised them. You loved them. That was my choice to make, not yours, not Jessica's, not Alexander's. I stood up, unable to stay in her presence any longer. I trusted you more than anyone in this world, and you betrayed me in the worst possible way. As I left my mother's house, I knew what I needed to do next. I contacted a private lab and ordered DNA paternity tests for all 3 children. Getting samples was surprisingly easy. A few strands of hair from each child's brush, a swab from inside my own cheek. And within a week, I had scientific confirmation of what I already knew in my heart. The genetic testing showed with 99.9% certainty that I was not the biological father of Emma, Jacob, or Sophie. The results sent me into a tailspin. I barely ate or slept for days. At work, I made careless mistakes that concerned my colleagues. At home, I went through the motions, reading bedtime stories and helping with homework while dying inside. Every time one of the kids called me daddy, I felt physical pain in my chest. Every time Jessica kissed me goodbye or said I love you, I had to resist the urge to scream the truth at her. Yet some stubborn part of me held on, watching and waiting. I observed Jessica more carefully now. The late-night texts, the work events that kept her out until morning, the secret smiles at her phone. She still had no idea I knew. Neither did Alexander, apparently. I discovered his full name was Alexander Reeves, a successful real estate developer who lived just 20 minutes from our home. He was divorced with no other children, at least none that he acknowledged. I began to formulate a plan, not just to leave, but to ensure that Jessica, Alexander, and my mother faced the consequences of their actions. I consulted with a divorce attorney, careful to use a firm in another city where no one would recognize me. The lawyer was blunt in our state. I would likely still be financially responsible for the children, since I had acted as their father, regardless of biology. I had signed the birth certificates and accepted the role of father, and family courts prioritized the children's well-being over biological relationships. This realization led me to a more drastic plan. I began liquidating assets, transferring funds to offshore accounts my attorney helped me establish. I created a shell company and gradually moved money into it all, while maintaining appearances at home. I sold investments and claimed the funds were for the children's college accounts. I worked with a document specialist to create a new identity, complete with passports and credit histories. James Wilson would become my new name, my ticket to freedom. Throughout these preparations, the hardest part was spending time with the children. Every soccer game of Jacob's, every dance recital of Emma's, every bedtime story for Sophie became precious and painful. They were innocent in all this, yet they would be collateral damage in the nuclear option I was planning. I told myself they would be fine. They had Jessica, Alexander, and my mother. They had never truly been mine anyway. As Thanksgiving approached, I put the final pieces of my plan into motion. I invited extended family from both sides, friends from work, neighbors, and most importantly, Alexander. Jessica was surprised when I suggested including him. "Alex, from your office," I clarified innocently. "You are always talking about how helpful he is. I thought it would be nice to include him since he mentioned he has no family in town." Jessica hesitated just long enough to be suspicious before agreeing with false enthusiasm. "That is a great idea. I will invite him." I spent lavishly on the preparations, ordering a premium free-range turkey, expensive wines, and gourmet side dishes. I told Jessica money was no object for what would be our most memorable Thanksgiving ever. She had no idea how true that statement would be. The day arrived, and our home filled with guests. Jessica seemed nervous constantly, glancing between Alexander and me, as if expecting something to go wrong. My mother arrived early to help cook, her eyes following me with apprehension. She had tried calling me several times since our confrontation, but I had refused to discuss the matter further with her. Today, she would learn the consequences of her betrayal. Alexander arrived looking confident and comfortable, greeting Jessica with a familiarity that now seemed obvious. He shook my hand firmly, meeting my eyes with no trace of guilt. To him, I was just the clueless husband, the meal ticket, the unwitting provider for his biological children. He had no idea that I could see right through him now. I played the perfect host, pouring drinks and engaging in small talk. I asked Alexander about his work, his hobbies, and his childhood, with genuine curiosity, studying the genetic source of my children's features. Emma had his eyes. Jacob had his height and build. Sophie had his curly hair and dimples. How had I never seen it before? As dinner progressed, I noticed Jessica relaxing, probably assuming the event would pass without incident. My mother, too, seemed to breathe easier as the meal continued without confrontation. Just before dessert, I stood up and tapped my glass for attention. "I want to thank everyone for coming to our home for this special Thanksgiving," I began. "This holiday is about gratitude, and I have been reflecting a lot lately on what I am truly grateful for." Jessica smiled up at me, completely unaware of what was coming. "Truth is a gift, though sometimes a painful one," I continued. "Today, I want to share some truths with all of you, my closest family and friends." The room quieted. Jessica's smile faltered. "I have prepared a special envelope for each of you," I said, retrieving a stack of envelopes from a side table. "Inside is something unique for each person, a truth I think you deserve to know." I moved around the table, placing a sealed envelope beside each person's plate. Jessica's hand trembled as she received hers. Alexander looked confused, but curious. My mother's face had gone completely white. "Please do not open them just yet," I instructed. "First a toast, to family, to truth, to consequences." I raised my glass, took a sip, and then nodded. "Now you may open your envelopes." The room filled with the sound of tearing paper. Jessica opened hers first, her eyes widening in horror as she saw the DNA test results, proving none of the children were mine. Alexander received copies of his text messages with Jessica, along with photos of him, with the children he had fathered, but never publicly claimed. My mother's envelope contained her emails to Jessica, helping orchestrate the deception, along with a note that said simply, "You chose her over me. Now you can have each other but not me." The other guests received evidence of the affair, the paternity tests, and the conspiracy of lies. The room erupted in gasps and murmurs. Jessica began to cry. Alexander stood up abruptly, and my mother reached for my arm, which I pulled away. "Lucas, please," Jessica sobbed. "We can explain." "I think the DNA tests explain everything quite clearly," I replied calmly. 3 children, 0% chance of paternity, 12 years of marriage, thousands of lies, a lifetime of betrayal. I turned to Alexander. "Congratulations. You have 3 beautiful children. I assume you will want to take financial responsibility for them, now including those expensive private school tuitions." Then, to my mother, "I hope destroying your only son's life was worth keeping your daughter-in-law happy." Before anyone could respond, I walked to the door and picked up the suitcase I had hidden in the coat closet earlier that day. "Enjoy the pumpkin pie. The recipe card is in the kitchen if anyone wants it. I will not be needing it anymore." I walked out without looking back, ignoring the calls of my name. My car was packed with the few possessions I cared to keep. Everything else I was leaving behind, along with my old identity. The new passport for James Wilson was in my pocket, and a one-way ticket to Singapore would be my passage to a new life. I drove straight to the airport, parked my car in the long-term lot, and left the keys and title in an envelope addressed to my lawyer, with instructions to sell it and add the proceeds to the children's trust funds I had established. Despite everything, I could not bring myself to punish the children financially for their parents' betrayal. The trust funds were the one thing I had not liquidated, though I had removed my name as trustee and replaced it with a neutral third party. As my flight took off, I looked down at the twinkling lights of the city where I had lived my entire life, feeling a strange mix of grief and liberation. Everything I had known was gone. Everyone I had loved had betrayed me. Yet somehow, watching the city disappear beneath the clouds, I felt lighter than I had in years. The truth, painful as it was, had set me free. My new life began the moment I landed in Singapore. James Wilson rented a modest apartment and took a job with an engineering startup, accepting a fraction of my previous salary. The company was developing sustainable building technologies, something I had always been passionate about, but had never pursued, while focusing on providing for my family. The first few months were the hardest. I would wake up reaching for children who were not there, momentarily forgetting that everything had changed. I dreamed of Emma's laugh, Jacob's soccer games, and Sophie's bedtime stories. I had chosen freedom from betrayal, but it came at the cost of the 3 people I loved most in the world, regardless of DNA. I threw myself into work, to escape the pain. The startup appreciated my experience and dedication. Within a year, I had developed a new insulation system that reduced energy costs by 40%. When our first major contract came through, I was made a partner in the firm. By year 3, we had expanded to offices in Malaysia, Vietnam, and Australia. By year 5, we were acquired by a major international corporation, making me a multimillionaire almost overnight. Financial success did not heal the wound of losing my family, but it gave me purpose. I invested in other startups, primarily those working on sustainability and renewable energy. I lived simply despite my growing wealth, donating significant amounts to children's charities anonymously. In a way, it helped me feel connected to Emma, Jacob, and Sophie, though I never contacted them directly. My personal healing came more slowly. I tried therapy, meditation, and even a brief spiritual retreat in Bali. I dated occasionally, but could never bring myself to fully trust again. The betrayal had left scars too deep to ignore. It was during a business trip to Tokyo that I met Sophia, a Japanese-American architect consulting on one of our projects. Unlike previous relationships, this one developed slowly, built on mutual respect and brutal honesty from the beginning. I told her my real name and my entire story 6 months after we began dating. She was the first and only person in my new life who knew the truth. "You survived something that would have destroyed most people," she told me. "Instead of letting it define you, you built something new." With Sophia's encouragement, I began to consider the possibility of returning to my hometown, not to reclaim my old life, but to make peace with the past. After 10 years abroad, I had built a business empire worth billions. The shy, hard-working engineer who had been so thoroughly betrayed was gone. In his place was a confident, powerful man who no longer feared facing those who had hurt him. I began my return strategically, using shell companies to purchase key properties and businesses in my hometown. I bought the building where Alexander's real estate company was headquartered, the shopping center where my mother still worked part-time, and even the private school my children had attended. I donated $10 million to renovate the science center at the local university, ensuring the new facility would bear the Wilson name. When I finally returned physically, I did so as James Wilson, reclusive billionaire philanthropist. I had changed my appearance enough that casual acquaintances would not recognize me. My hair, once dark brown, was now silver at the temples. I wore designer suits instead of the department store clothes I had favored before. I had LASIK surgery instead of the glasses I had worn since college. But most significantly, the decade of building a new life had changed how I carried myself. The local newspaper ran a front-page story about the mysterious billionaire who had suddenly taken interest in their small city. I purchased the largest home in the area, a mansion on a hill that overlooked the neighborhood where my former family had lived. I hired staff, including a personal assistant, who handled all direct interactions, so I could maintain my privacy. It was during a charity gala that I first saw Jessica again. She had aged, lines of stress evident around her eyes. She was still with Alexander, I learned, though they had never married. They entered the ballroom together, but there was no warmth between them. My sources had informed me that their relationship had deteriorated after my departure. The scandal had affected Alexander's business, and the financial burden of suddenly being responsible for 3 children had strained their relationship. I watched them from across the room, feeling nothing but a dull ache where blinding rage had once lived. They did not recognize me, and I made no effort to approach them. This night was not about confrontation, but observation. I needed to see them to confirm what I already knew: they no longer had any power over me. Later that week, I received an unexpected visitor at my office. Emma, now 22, had somehow discovered who I really was. She stood in my doorway, a beautiful young woman with Alexander's eyes, but expressions and mannerisms that reminded me painfully of the little girl I had raised. "You look different," she said without preamble, "but I would know you anywhere." I gestured for her to sit, unsure what to say to this child who was never mine but whom I had loved completely. "How did you find out?" I asked. I always knew something happened that Thanksgiving. I was 12, old enough to understand that something terrible had occurred, even if no one would explain it to me. As I got older, I pieced things together from overheard conversations and old photographs. When the mysterious James Wilson started buying up half the town, I got curious. Your donation to the university used Mom's favorite quote in the dedication. That seemed like too much of a coincidence. She was smart, just as she had been as a child. I felt a surge of pride despite myself. Are you angry with me for leaving? I asked. Emma considered the question carefully. I was for a long time. You were my dad. DNA did not change that. You taught me to ride a bike and helped me with my science fair projects. Then suddenly you were gone, and everyone acted like we were never supposed to talk about you again. Her honesty was refreshing after so many years of lies. Alexander tried to step in, but it never felt right. He was always Alex, never Dad. Mom became bitter. Grandma Martha never recovered from losing you. She apologized to us constantly, though as kids we did not understand what she was apologizing for. Learning about my mother's regret brought complicated emotions. Martha had died 3 years earlier, I had learned. We had never reconciled. I do not hate you for leaving, Emma continued. I understand why you did. I just wish you had taken us with you. Her words broke something open inside me that I had kept carefully sealed for a decade. The idea that the children might have chosen me over their biological parents had never occurred to me. Over the following months, I cautiously reconnected with all 3 children. Jacob was in college studying engineering, following the path I had once shown him. Sophie was finishing high school, artistic and sensitive, as she had always been. They each had their own reactions to my return. Jacob was angry at first, then curious about the business empire I had built. Sophie simply hugged me and cried the first time we met. I never sought reconciliation with Jessica or Alexander. The past was past, and some betrayals cannot be forgiven. But I found that vengeance no longer motivated me. The success I had achieved was not about proving something to those who had hurt me, but about discovering my own strength. The most valuable lesson I learned from this painful journey was that true freedom comes not from escaping the past, but from refusing to let it define your future. The family I had lost gave me the determination to build something new. The betrayal I experienced taught me resilience I never knew I possessed, and the love I still felt for 3 children who did not share my blood showed me that family is about more than genetics. Life will break your heart sometimes. People you trust implicitly will betray you. The foundations you thought were solid will crumble beneath your feet. But what matters is not the breaking. What matters is how you rebuild. What painful truth have you had to face in your life, and how did it change you? Share your story in the comments below. If this journey of betrayal and redemption resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of overcoming life's greatest challenges. And if you know someone who is struggling to rebuild after betrayal, share this video with them. Sometimes knowing others have walked the same difficult path can be the first step toward healing. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, your worst day can become the first day of your best life.